Hello and welcome, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Just 2 days before the Premium Cigar Association trade show, Christmas for the cigar industry. It's that time of the year, and we're here today live to offer you a little warm up show to get everybody excited and fired up and lit up for the PCA trade show, which is just around the corner. For everybody going, I hope this is a wonderful way to sort of kickstart your holiday week with the upcoming trade show. For everybody who's not attending, maybe we can offer you some very interesting insights and clarify a little bit all the things around the PCA and the trade show in general. And I am delighted and very happy to welcome a special guest for today's show. Joining me on this pre-game live show, Kevin Shan from Cigar Prop. Kevin, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for
Welcome to the
having
Light 'em
me.
Up Lounge.
Thank
It's a
you.
pleasure and a privilege. Kevin, we want to talk a little bit about your cigar journey. We want to talk a little bit about how you got into the industry, all the various things that you're taking care of and that you're doing. But we also want to talk about the upcoming trade show, why it is so important, the pros and cons, the goods, the bads. This exciting news regarding the FDA lawsuit that were announced yesterday evening. So plenty to stuff to talk about. But first of all, Kevin, share your opinion. I said in my announcement that this is probably the holiday week for the cigar industry. What's your perspective on that, and how do you see like the whole trade show time and week and that being so important and exciting for the cigar industry globally?
I'm actually surprised that you're excited over PCA. It's just I thought Inter Tobacco was like the big thing in Europe. I honestly didn't know that PCA was as big as it was across the pond. Same with TP. What about TPE? If I can ask you a question, are you? Does everybody get as excited over TPE, or is it really just a PCA thing?
Well, I think in general, the PCA is still very interesting, even for the Eastern Hemisphere and consumers over here in Europe. Secondly, we have a global audience, so there's quite many folks from the US watching usually. I think in recent years, the PCA has made quite some effort to actually opening up a little more and expanding their horizon to the international markets as well. Last year, we actually did an international panel session. There will be another one this year during the trade show with Ricardo Leone from Ports over in the UK. There'll be quite a few manufacturers in attendance. Jeremiah Maripel will be part of the panel, as will be Joshua Habersky, talking about all the international affairs and how we as a global cigar community can actually come together closer. In regards to TPE, it's probably less covered and less well known over here in the Eastern Hemisphere. But I'd be curious to extend that question to our audience as well and hear their opinion. But certainly, I still think that PCA is probably the most important one with a stronger US perspective. And you mentioned Inter Tobacco, obviously, that the one trade show over here in Europe being the second heavyweight later in the year come September. So that's my perspective, at least. But I see more and more excitement in the international markets regarding PCA.
Oh, right on. And this will actually be my very first PCA that I'll have attended. And for me, it's got, and it was a last minute trip. So like this wasn't planned. We attend so many events from so many of our sponsors, advertisers, our partners in the industry. We've really got to pick and choose which events that we go to, because every event can be thousands of dollars to attend an event, unless it's being paid for by somebody. So yeah, this one was a last moment event. I'll be at the trade show just for one full day is all I will have. But like you, I've been excited over the years. I've watched all my friends. Like I said, we talk all the time, whether they're at the trade show and when they get back. So I feel like I've been there 100 times, like you guys probably have. You see the photos, you see the interviews. The only thing that you can't feel is that buzz, that excitement of being in that room. It's like any event. So I'm pretty excited, to see how it goes. I'm going as a member of the media. I know the media has had a tumultuous past with the PCA. It's something that we feel like we're not invited or we're not included. Like it's for the manufacturers, it's for the brick and mortars, or the shops to go. That's their time. And in the past, media has really been pushed off to the side and not treated poorly, but not treated well. So I guess a lot of that's going to change this year. So I guess they've introduced a lot more, trying to be a little bit more media friendly. So I'm excited to see how, as a member of the media, and I see a good friend Val Bradshaw. Val, hi, is on with us. But yeah, so I'm excited to see PCA, to see what it's all about. Just and seeing those inner workings. Like, there's only so much you can get from a video, from a picture, from an interview, and just to see what those, like I said, how it functions as a whole. So I'm super excited for it.
Very good point. Now, for everybody watching and those people who probably haven't attended the PCA trade show before, you made the point about cigar media, Kevin, and this has been debated over the years. William Cooper just today shared his posting that he did a couple of years ago, and he sort of re-emphasized his point last year before the trade show, and reposted yet again about the role of cigar media and how they were treated over the years, and that it's become more and more important. So I think that's a very important point. But what a lot of people probably don't have on their radar as much is that primarily the PCA trade show is an industry trade show where sales are the primary target and the primary objective. And for a lot of consumers and media professionals and people who are generally interested in what's happening in the cigar industry, that probably sometimes slips a little bit, or it just doesn't feel that way. So it's kind of challenging to balance the both and make sure that at the one hand, there's enough room for all the sales to happen, and enough time for the retailers and the manufacturers to come together, create those very important sales. Yet on the other hand, it has also become such an important platform to announce new lines and new products to the market. And it's a media gathering where, in a very focused and condensed form, the media outlets and professionals have a great chance of meeting up with all the manufacturers, getting those interviews, and sharing some of the latest whereabouts in the industry. So I think that's a fine balancing act. How do you think that's gonna unfold this year? And what's your strategy on where do you want to chime in, and how do you want to cover the trade show?
I'm because it was last minute. I'm not doing any interviews. That they're pretty much essentially all taken, because for manufacturers to, they have to do their sales, like you said, and then they have to do the media at the same time. The manufacturers, some of the manufacturers want to focus on the media, like Steve Saka at Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust. He's dedicated all of his time to the media. There's very little time for a brick and mortar, a lounge owner, to get any time with him, because he realizes that the media is the one that is getting his brand out. Yes, he needs to sell those cigars to the lounges, but he also needs free promotion, essentially. He needs the media to pick up on that new cigar, that new blend. So it's a fine balancing act. So a lot of the, or some of the manufacturers, they dedicate an X amount of time, and you book a schedule. They usually give you 30 minutes between this block and this block, and then they'll mix it up. They'll talk with, shop owners for an X amount of time, and then they go back to the block of media. So unfortunately, most of the blocks were already taken up. So I just want to go there not really getting a lot of interviews, but just maybe trying to shoot a perspective of behind the scenes as a cigar consumer, even though that I am a member of the media. I am a brand owner per se, but I kind of want to go there and as the typical fan, like we all are. You know, you walk into Disney World and like, what do you take in to begin with? So I kind of want to capture some of the cool stuff behind the scenes, and just kind of go about it that way. Just kind of like I said, just be a kid in a candy store and try and capture some cool moments.
That sounds wonderful. From your perspective now, you mentioned that it's your first time physically in attendance, but you've you followed the trade show for a long time. How do you think it has changed over the years? And in your perspective, where do you think that the trade show is headed in general?
I don't know where the trade show is headed. There are manufacturers that I talk to on a one-on-one that say that the PCA has gotten worse over the years, that they say they've lost their way, if you will. It just, maybe they've gotten too big and they're focusing on this big event when they should be really, focusing on the sales, focusing on the cigars. And other manufacturers have said the complete opposite, that it's only gotten better. But I think if that was the case, you wouldn't see TPE growing exponentially every year. There are a lot of manufacturers going to TPE solely, just because it's not bigger, it's more fun. It's more of, not, I don't want to say a party, but it's just something that's chilled. It's a little bit more laid back, and it's just a lot funner of an event to attend. But from me on the outside looking in for everything else, I don't see that it's changed a whole lot over the years. Sadly, I think the boutique cigars, I don't feel that they're being included more like they should be. A lot of these boutique cigar companies that are just starting off, they can't afford to go. I think there should be something done on the PCA, as in, subsidizing these newer companies that are coming in, be it put everybody in one specific section, and helping them get brand awareness. Like we talked about media, I think there definitely needs to be something more on the media side. I think they need to take care of the media, because I can tell you most media, they're not there promoting the PCA at all. They're promoting the cigars, the cigar manufacturers. If the PCA would maybe focus a little bit more on the media, maybe the media would focus a little bit more on what PCA does, what they say they stand for, all the rights that they fight for, but they don't. So, you can see a lot of the media won't be focusing too much on PCA. They'll be focusing just on the manufacturers. So, but yeah, it'll be interesting still to go there for the first time and really see it up hand. And then going there next year, we do plan on going and spending, the entire 5 days or so next year. So it'll be interesting next year to see how much it changes as well.
I mean, one thing that I have to say, you mentioned that probably some of the smaller boutique manufacturers don't feel represented as much, or feel like they have less of a chance of being there and showcasing product. I don't necessarily think that that's the case. I mean, last year I've seen quite many smaller manufacturers and even booths where different companies were teaming up and bundling sort of their efforts and their presence, and there possibly could be more of those efforts. I still think in general the PCA is such an important part of the entire industry and ecosystem, and booking your booth and being present at the PCA is not just about sales, in my humble opinion, but really also about showing your respect to the organization and the industry as a whole. I mean, just recently, yesterday actually, the news broke with a somewhat positive outlook on the whole case in front of the court between the FDA and representatives of the premium cigar industry through various different organizations. And there you can see how important it actually is to have strong organizations, to have strong representatives. And that's where I think some people have been very critical about whether it's Cigar Rights of America, whether it's the PCA, but ultimately we still need to realize that it's so important to have those strong organizations, to support them, and put your money where your mouth is, if that makes sense. And I'm sure you get a lot of like similar comments from the manufacturers and the industry folks that you have on your podcast, on your show. And I'm curious as to whether they in general share like a positive outlook on the trade show.
No, they don't. The cost is the one thing that's prohibitive. And for as many boutique cigar companies that will be attending PCA this year as they did last year and the year before, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of brands that can't attend because of the cost. It's just the cost, from what everybody says, is spiraling out of control. We'll take me just for instance. I am flying out on a Friday morning. I am coming home on a Sunday morning. With my cost of the PCA membership, which is $450 for a year to be a media membership. And that essentially gets me absolutely nothing all year long as a member of media. It is $3,000, $3,000 for me to attend this event for the one day. If I was staying longer, it would be exponentially more because I'd have to have hotel rooms for each day after that, and then food and everything else. Some of these brand owners, they're spending $10,000, $20,000, upwards. I've heard of a small boutique company, like really small, spending upwards of $75,000 to attend this show, and he has no hopes of making that money back. And it's just in the small hopes that the media will be there and will give his brand enough recognition to possibly push that out there. So yeah, it's I don't hear great things from the manufacturers just because of the price point of when it is. It's the weekend after our July 4th, our Independence Day. I'll be out in Vegas this weekend. Average temperature will be 108 degrees in Vegas. It's the hottest time of the year. And it's just brutal. So I think as a whole, I'll be honest. I said I don't hear a lot of positives. I hear more negatives as a whole from the industry, across the board, than I hear positives about the event.
Let's not forget that also the world is in a challenging state at the moment. There's quite a lot going on in terms of economy, certainly in international politics. Inflation has become quite a big topic to address for, well, both the international markets, but certainly also the United States. So I think that will have a tremendous impact on what we see happening during the trade show. And we just had Ed Sullivan comment over on Facebook that he also thinks companies that have good value offerings will do best, and probably may not be the right time to introduce new products at a higher price point. On the other hand, though, interestingly enough, Will Cooper also mentioned in one of his pre-show coverages that he's seeing a lot of announcements that there will be a lot more higher priced cigars being introduced this year. And the question was whether this is because of inflation, tobacco costs, and other operational costs, obviously. But it's, according to him, also coming from newer companies with less of a proven track record. So that'll probably be interesting to see how that pans out and how the retail community will actually reflect on that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm seeing that as well. A lot of high prices coming out this year. The MSRP. It's in years past, you've seen the lower price points. It's companies coming out with a new brand. Hold on a second. My dog would like to come inside. Okay. So
join the party. Welcome.
Exactly. So yeah, but this year it's been a lot of higher price cigars. So it's and there are some companies that it doesn't make a difference what their price point is. Steve Saka, Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust, he's going to sell everything that he has. It doesn't make a difference what the price point is. Nick Melillo Foundation will be there. So some of these manufacturers, it's not going to make a difference on the price. But what's shocking is to see some of these boutique cigar companies coming in with some of these price points. There's a boutique cigar company here in Florida that will be making its debut at PCA, and they're only showing up with one cigar, and the MSRP on that cigar is going to be $35. For a single cigar from a company that nobody's heard of, and that boggles my mind that you'd show up to an event with such a premium cigar. Not saying maybe it'll do really well, but yeah, I see that too. A lot of prices, and talking with the manufacturers, I know it's the supply chain. It's getting cigar bands. It's getting cigar boxes. Cigar boxes are almost impossible to get. Cigar bands are getting tougher. Steve Saka had just made a post the other day or last week about cellophane. They can't get cellophane, for the cigars. It's through the roof. They're having to use cheaper cellophane and whatever they can get their hands on because the premium stuff just isn't available. So it's definitely a trickle up effect, on everything.
Great follow-up comment from Ed Sullivan, where he said many of the new products were conceived and developed while the boom was still going strong, and probably it's unfortunate timing that they're now coming out in more of an economic downturn. But on another note, what's interesting is that whilst the boom was so strong, we saw incredible import numbers, and everybody was in happy mood and was thinking that they were really living through another boom. Now we're kind of seeing that level out, and it seems that the retailers are pretty well stocked. There's deals coming out from certain of the retailers, and that's where you start questioning: are we really in such a great state as an industry overall? And it'll be another interesting observation to see as to the retailers all go in and really want to go all out with their purchases and stock up like crazy if they're probably perfectly filled.
I agree, and one thing that I would love to see, and I don't think we ever would. It would be something that would be hard to do, but I would like to see what the state of the industry really is. All the manufacturers, they want to say we've had record sales, we're importing this, and shop owners like, oh, we're doing very well. I would love to see some kind of someone come in and really, anonymously, get these numbers. Is the industry doing as good as everybody claims? Because right now we're still in this boom. You're right. We are starting to see, things just level off slightly, but it's still, everybody's still ordering in record numbers, and it's absolutely insane. And I'm just wondering, how long can, be it here overseas, how long can this keep going? It just can't. Like with any housing boom or anything economically, there's got to be a drop off, and hopefully it's just a short drop off. It levels off, and that'll be fine. We just don't want to see something like we did, 15 years ago, where it just plummets through the floor.
Well, and we can only learn from past experiences. And some people might argue that history does not necessarily repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. And let's hope that we as an industry can learn and evolve from past experiences and try to do better at a certain point. Charlie, who was here with us at the lounge, had a great comment, not purely in regards to the PCA trade show, but issues with supply chain and demand in general. Charlie, if you wanted to chime in and probably post your question, I'd be very happy to discuss that. Also because I think it's very relevant for the state of the industry in general and the future that we're headed in. So chime in, brother. Always great to have you.
It's always great to see companies having some flexibility and imagination with regard to dealing with problems. And long before the pandemic, long before supply chain issues, Padron would take back cigar boxes and actually pay retailers to send back cigar boxes from cigars that they would basically sell in their shops. I actually pick up cigar boxes from all the cigar lounges I go to and bag them up so they don't throw them in the trash, and give them to friends with fire pits, because they make the absolute best tinder for fire pits because of the cedar lining. And instead of going into the trash, we just burn them up, which is great. But nobody else that I'm aware of recycles all these boxes, and so when you have complaints about not availability of boxes, that may cause a problem with price increases or inavailability of cigars. I mean, the only thing we should be worried about is the tobacco and the quality of labor to roll our cigars. Batching them up as fumas, putting them in paper. Our friends at Newman do that with a lot of their cigars. That's not a problem of delivering as long as the cigars are well humidified. But more manufacturers should contemplate recycling of these boxes. And I know shipping costs are tremendous with regard to getting the boxes back, and the Postal Service is going to increase their shipping costs in the middle of the month. But that's a good solution, especially when they're denuding all the forests down in Nicaragua and Honduras for these cigar boxes as it is.
I agree. There should definitely be either, I know there's recycling programs sending some boxes back, and I know that gets cost prohibitive. But you're right. There are some companies that send out, bundles. If you have boxes, we will give you a small break. Can we send you the bundles to put, back in the boxes, and you can reuse the boxes. Some manufacturers don't want to do that. They only want to use, boxes and send out freshly cellophaned and wrapped and beautiful cigars. And that way they know that there's absolutely no chance of getting damaged by someone. Shipping in bundles, removing the bundles, handling them and putting them back in the boxes. But I see that I feel that we're already seeing some of these manufacturers that are just strictly going to bundles, going to butcher wrap. And I don't mind that. As a consumer, I hate box like you. I have piles of boxes and I hate throwing them away when they get piled up. But like I said, it's some manufacturers I think are seeing the light. We've got several new cigars coming out personally for our company, and I don't see myself ever using a box ever. That's not something I'm interested in. It's not cost effective, and it's not good for our environment. How many trees are we going to cut down just to make a box? And everybody loves a fancy box. I always make fun of Steve Sockett, Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust. He's got his new Bewitched. And someone will probably tag Steve in this and say I made fun of him, but you get 7 cigars in that box. Each cigar comes in its own little coffin box, and then 7 of those are packed into another box. And that's how they come. That's mind-blowing. Each cigar gets a box, and then a bunch of boxes go into another box. I don't know. But yeah, I think we're going to see the going back to the more Cubanesque style boxes of the cardboard, which I love those back in the day. They were fantastic. They were beautiful boxes, and it's definitely something that can be made out of recycled material. And people that want boxes, hopefully we'll see maybe go back to that style.
Kevin, I think it would be interesting to probably be on the lookout for alternative ways of packaging during the trade show and in general during the coming months towards the end of the year, because I believe that there needs to be a more vivid conversation about what alternative ways of packaging could the industry probably come up with in order to battle the shortages that we're all facing. So that's the pure economics of it that we all need to accept and face. But secondly, I mean, every industry now is thinking about sustainable ways of building for the future and finding new pathways and alleyways of continuing legacy in the craft, but also bringing in innovation that will help the entire ecosystem evolve and grow. So I'm curious as to whether there'll be any specific innovation or focus on alternative packaging moving forward.
I'm interested as well, but I think unfortunately when your products are produced, it's I don't want to I don't want to put a negative connotation on it, but essentially when you have no incentive to save money, you know, when you're producing a product in a third world country per se, and your costs are next to nothing, do you have any incentive to spending money to look for alternative packaging, maybe something more environmentally friendly, when it's not something that is high on the priority list, when you're paying someone, you know, next to nothing? Is that a priority?
Reinhard, I got a suggestion for you. Why don't you promote the idea of getting back to cardboard boxes or other less or more environmentally friendly packaging, and do some polling through Cigar Journal, etc., and find out if the cigar family out there would support the users. Because until they get pressure back from the consumers, you know, basically everybody's out there fighting for shelf space. They're fighting for to promote their $15 cigar, let alone $30 cigars. And packaging, you know, when my buddy Steve wants to package his things in a couple different cigar boxes, you know, he's basically trying to justify the quality, the expense of the cigar he's selling.
Yeah.
You know, his cigars are fantastic, but you know, would they be any more or any less if he packaged them in a less expensive way? And so I think feedback from the cigar community, the consumers, it would be the way to pressure, since we can vote with our feet by not buying the more expensive boxes, which is tough to do because you want the better cigars. I think just, you know, let's do some polling, and just see whether or not people will support their favorite cigars being delivered them in a non-box way. Obviously, the big issue is protecting cigars in the shipment process, but cardboard does the same thing.
You know, Charlie, I would like to see, you know, that's why I love forums like that. I love talking with cigar guys because you can spitball ideas. What I would like to see on top of that is picking out a couple of big retailers throughout the country. You know, you've got Dave Garofalo up there in your area. We got Jeff Borshowitz at Corona. Is having a couple of manufacturers make a couple of different boxes, I think would be a great idea. So have, you know, Steve Saka, whoever, doesn't make any difference. Put you know, two same cigars side by side in a cardboard box and their traditional wooden box, and just have their employees monitor. Are the ones in the cardboard, are they being asked about, hey, what's different about these? Or are people seeing in a wooden box, is it, oh, that wooden box, that must be, even though it's the same cigar, same band, you know, are they constantly drawing from that wooden box, or are they selling equally? You know, that might be a blind study, you know, that you could also gauge the industry, and then, you know, approach the, you know, the brand owner like, hey, you know, your cigars are selling the exact same out of a cardboard box, out of a wooden box, you know, and then maybe that opens up a conversation as well.
Well, all I
yeah.
know is I'm the guy who drives up in his SUV and hauls away in the trash pot. They laugh at me because it's like, just give me the boxes. I give them to friends. I have in my garage right now 2 huge trash bags full of gorgeous boxes that cost probably a fortune, all the top brands, and I just give them to friends to burn up in their fire pits. You know, it's summer here in Boston, so you know it's a great thing to do. But it's from the Garafalos, from Jack Deckermangi, Edgar Deckermangi, from all the guys up here that I frequent, and I just, you know, I haul it away because I hate to see them throw the stuff in the trash. You know, even though I'm not recycling them back to the manufacturers,
Yeah,
they're at least getting used in a way that is arguably environmentally friendly. We're burning them up.
yep.
Jolly, excellent point. Great suggestion on the polling. We're already working on an editorial on lightemupworld.com to address exactly that topic, and we'll talk to various different manufacturers, the retail community, and the end consumer. And it's going to be very interesting to see what comes out of there. Speaking of, for everybody who's curious, if you haven't checked out reels and long format content there with our guest author Macy Hansen, who just recently wrote about the whole topic of vintage versus the idea of consistency every single year. So that's a very interesting topic that just went live, and certainly worth your time and worth a read. Val, I'm sure you had a comment or probably a follow-up question on the topic. Wonderful to see you back at the lounge. Welcome. Great to have you with us again.
Thank you. So I hope I'm on unmute.
You are. I hear you perfectly.
Thank you. Great to see you, Kevin. One of my favorite people of all time, as are you, Reinhard. Really, really glad to be here. I wanted to just touch on a couple of things when it comes to the packaging of cigars. Yes, Steve Saka likes to put cigars into coffins. Beautiful presentation. And I think there is room, both economically speaking and on the shelves, for packaging that is designed for gift giving. We see it a lot during the holiday season, where perfume companies, people that are expecting their products will be given as gifts, they go to a little better, let's not say better, a little more elaborate packaging. So, you know, from a retail standpoint, I can see some value in prestige packaging, let's call it that. So going back to PCA, I've been attending PCA since 2015. Of course, I missed it during the shutdown. And because I'm in Canada, I didn't want to risk traveling this summer, and for good reason. Airports are a little crazy right now. But I remember in 2015, PCA was massive. You couldn't cover the floor in a day. And yes, things have changed, and I'm not sure why, but I still think it's a phenomenal show. I think the current PCA staff works harder than I've ever seen PCA staff work before. So through no fault of their own, if things are changing, it's unfortunate, because they deserve for things to keep getting better for PCA. And I always thought it was a blast. On the subject of cigar media, one of the things that's always concerned me is, yes, cigar media has a place in PCA, and thankfully PCA has a wonderful relationship with cigar media. However, one of the things that draws people to a show like that is the after parties or the after socializing. And typically with PCA, people would get together at the Circle Bar along with the manufacturers, and it was fabulous. However, in recent times, there was the so-called cigar media compound, to which it was kind of an exclusive club. Not everybody was invited, and I think that's a bit of a stain on cigar media when it comes to PCA, because it should be open to everybody. If you're calling yourself cigar media, you can't decide which media qualifies and which doesn't, which manufacturer qualifies and which doesn't. That's a personal opinion. But I also thought that it kind of detracted from what happens after the show for everybody to get together and socialize. I think that's important. On the subject of packaging, circling back to that, hopefully the US is never going to be faced with what Canada now has and what Europe is looking at where it comes to plain packaging, because if that happens, you don't have to worry about packaging. It's going to be one thing and one thing only, and the government will enact laws to make sure that plain packaging is adhered to and followed. So live it up while you can with your packaging, because it's on the horizon. And that's the important part of PCA, is they're fighting those fights. And I think it's great that PCA exists.
Great comments, Valerie. Greatly appreciated.
Very well said, Brad.
Interesting topic that you bring up. Kevin, that's probably one of the topics that I would like to discuss with you as well. And that is, it seems that for obvious reasons, last year, the frequency or the density of after our events, parties after the main event were considerably less. And Will Cooper rightfully mentioned that it seems for this trend to continue well into this year, and the whole dynamic could change there. Now, obviously, as Valerie said, the Circle Bar is still a place where everybody can hang out, have a cigar, have a drink, and have a leisurely chat. But what's your perspective on parties from manufacturers and some of the more I don't know, hosted events by cigar companies and manufacturers, if that makes sense, primarily or even exclusively for attendees after the trade show?
From what I'm hearing, there's going to be more this year than there ever has been. I guess COVID really did affect some of the, just a lot of, being able to go outside without a mask, where you can smoke. So from what I understand, COVID really took effect on that. A lot of manufacturers are, from what they're telling me personally, they're coming back out full steam this year. All of the parties won't be an open invitation. Some it's invite only. You've got to know, if you didn't know about it ahead of time and you didn't get an invitation, you're not going to get in. But from what I'm hearing this year, there's going to be quite a few parties, and it's going to be more than it ever has been. Whether that's the case or not, I don't know. I'll definitely find out. Like I said, I'll have, Friday night, Saturday night of just checking out all the parties and seeing what it is like after hours. That's what I'm really curious about, because you don't see a lot of photos, a lot of videos of these after hour parties. I don't know if it wasn't, maybe it's taboo to take photos. I don't know. I guess I'll find that out when I show up to some of these parties. I'll definitely ask, am I allowed to take photos? Because like I said, you're just not seeing a lot of what happens inside these parties. But like I said, from what I'm hearing, there's going to be quite a few of them this year. So we'll find out.
I think that was one of the ongoing debates regarding the trade show in general, and that is the primary objective of the trade show really just the sales component, deals and certain exclusives that you only get at the trade show, or does the trade show need to have more of an educational component, more of a socializing component, or something that just goes beyond the pure transactional focus? And I think primarily in regards to the educational content and component, PCA has made an effort to increase that. Certainly last year, I was part of the international panel myself last year. Again, I know that there will be some this year, but I think this is probably where the organization could focus on more for future trade show events, to probably think about what else could be brought to the table in order to evolve the concept and keep it relevant for all the stakeholders of the industry.
Yeah, so from a brick and mortar standpoint, I know of probably maybe a little over a dozen brick and mortar, shop owners that are friends of mine that are going. They're focusing on the party and having the good time and meeting some of these manufacturers that they don't get to see. Steve Saka sometimes doesn't get to go out to a little town in Kansas or Iowa to visit some of these shop owners. So their only time to really hang out with him and maybe talk as these parties. Most of the brick and mortars that are locally here, to me, they already got their deals. Now there are a couple like Alec Bradley, and I know they announced they're going to have a PCA only cigar, but like the broad deals that are always there, those are already done. Those are, people have their orders in, and that's it. They're just not as many deals as there would be as pre like 4 years ago. I guess that was like the time, like you went to PCA, you placed the bulk of your orders for that year at the event because you got this X amount of deal at this event, and everybody said that's just not the case anymore. So on the brick and mortar side, they're looking to come out and have fun. Some of these shop owners, like my local shop, they don't ever go on vacation. They're open 7 days a week, and their only vacation this year is going to be PCA. So they're closing their shop for 7 or 8 days. They're going to go out to Vegas. They're going to have a little fun. They're going to attend PCA, attend the parties, get to meet these manufacturers, and then come back. So for them, it's a vacation. The manufacturers, same thing. It's the cost, of doing business out at PCA is coming out there and spending all of this money, and the deals have already been done. Like they've already got their orders in, and now it's just meeting and greeting the people and getting their media time in. So no, I've never heard anybody in the last couple of years ever mention any of the like the seminars or anything like that. Nobody has ever said, hey, I attended this really great seminar and I learned. I've never heard anybody say that. A manufacturer or a lounge owner has never, and maybe they have, they got some information, but that's never anything that they say. It's not anything that you ever, hear about. I don't hear any of the media guys really ever talking about, the seminars and all this informational stuff. It's essentially, what new cigars are out, and that's about it, and just having a good time.
Well, I agree on the good time part for sure, and that for quite a few people it might be an occasion to, just get a change of scenery, get out of their B&Ms and enjoy the camaraderie of being around all the manufacturers and other retailers. When it comes to the educational or the experiential component, I'm not so sure, to be honest. I mean, Jose Blanco always made a very good point that the trade show cannot be purely about deals and just the sales component, because that could probably do a disservice to both the organization and the future of the trade show in general. And I have to say, and I really have to applaud, there's going to be a Fuente seminar hosted by Carlito and Jose Blanco of Toro Fuente Cigars, which will be sort of an interactive session that will be all about cigar blending and a lot of interesting content there. So I think that is a great effort into moving the PCA trade show also towards more of an experience show. And in all honesty, I think that's what a lot of people positively commented on regarding the TPE, that the experiential component there was quite strong, with all the hosted events that were going on after hours, and just a lot of stuff around pure sales and the transactional component.
Yeah, I heard about the Carlito being there, and I'm excited to see what people think about that. It does sound fun. I don't know everything, all the details on it, so I'll be interested to see what people say about that afterwards. But like I said, if people are finding benefit in those seminars in getting that information, you don't hear them talking about it from where, from me, from what my sources and where I'm at online and who I talk to personally. that's not something that's ever brought up. But maybe it is something that's very important. But I don't know.
Kevin, let's maybe talk about that topic through a different perspective and lens. I'm very curious. I mean, you have a strong community with Cigar Prop. Your podcast is gathering a lot of attention on a weekly basis, and you have all various segments of the industry represented amongst your followers and your guests. Just last week, we spoke about that editorial focus as well. And we often discussed with our guest, Macy Hansen here, that there seems to be little in terms of pure editorial value and great articles, for example, that like seminars focus on in-depth knowledge, experience, growing the education for the industry as a whole. And so I'm curious, how do you think about that in context of your own platform, of your media outlet, your podcast? Do you think that the cigar industry as a whole needs more of that very valuable educational content, great editorial pieces, and just different pathways of bringing more knowledge, education, and thus also fun in the experience to the end consumer?
It's boring. Nobody wants to talk about the educational part of it. And that's just me being frank. So, like I said, I do videos, I do reviews, I do interviews, and I really keep track. I focus on the numbers of what people in the industry, the general consumer, what they want to know, what they want to learn, what they want to watch, how they want to be entertained. And I think we take it for granted because we're all cigar nerds. We love that in-depth. I want to know everything there is to know. I will read every piece of information that is put in front of me, but the average consumer does not. They just want to be entertained. They want to listen to their favorite cigar maker telling stories about the industry. When they get too in depth about either just too in depth in general about everything, people tend to die off. Not die off. They tend to tune out. Somebody needs to figure out a way to make it entertaining, but yet at the same time, be educational. And I try and be educational as well. But I know when people are tuning in to me, on a Monday night for 2 hours, they don't want to be bored to death. They want fun, they want excitement, they want laughter, and they generally don't want to be informed. I think that is where the brick and mortar comes in, to where you have a more captive audience. And I have said this for years, the brick and mortar, I don't think that the cigar industry, with the whole FDA, the rules and regulation, I think we would have cleared this up, probably 2 years ago if the average consumer knew about what was going on. I think we take it for granted. If you're in this chat panel today, you're a cigar nerd. You know what's going on in the FDA. But I can tell you, I have been in 100 lounges throughout the country, and it is rare that I have ever come across an informed consumer. And I don't want to speak poorly of that, saying, that there's anything wrong with that. They just don't know. I would say 75% of all the cigar smokers in the industry, they're not online. And if they are on Facebook, they're not in these Facebook groups. They're not watching these shows. They're not reading these trade journals. They're just going to their lounges with their buddies and they're smoking cigars. They don't have a clue of what's going on with the FDA, these rules, these regulations. I've never been into a cigar lounge that has had a poster up, that have said, hey, this is coming down, here's the email address of your local representative, shoot him an email, here, and we'll even give you a copy of the email. You don't have to type anything. You just have to send an email. That's never been the case. So I think on the educational side, I think the PCA getting together with the brick and mortars can do something to educate the general cigar consumer a little bit more than they have. I don't think it's necessarily our job all the time to do it because, like I said, a lot of people find that stuff boring.
Hey, Kevin, if you don't mind, I was going to throw this out, asking a question. Do you think that, right, so a lot of people will compare cigars with wine, right? And you look at somebody who's a casual wine drinker and somebody who's a casual cigar smoker, you can make the comparison. And if you also look at the growth of the cigar industry and cigar sales over the last 2 years, and COVID certainly played a part of that. What everyone seems to think, people locked up at home, took up smoking, it's grown tremendously. So there are a whole lot of new smokers out there. So if you look at some of the old school people like us who've been around and have been smoking cigars for maybe 20 years on and off, we have a little bit better of an education, just like somebody who's been drinking wine for a long time probably has a little bit better education, better understanding of the product, right? Anybody who's interested in, and just like if you look at tequilas or, bourbons and scotches, right? You would think that there's still that level of interest, that level of education. So maybe, is there a point where there's still a catch up that has to happen, right? So there's a lag in that desire to become educated because there are so many new people out there that are just taking up smoking as of recently.
Oh, there's definitely a huge lag, of that informed consumer, and we're seeing that every day, and thankfully I have a good following. People will send me a friend request on Facebook, or they'll join our group, Facebook group. And I'm like, hey, I'm new to cigar smoking. I just started a few months ago. My buddy Dan sent me over here. I hope to learn, a lot about cigars. So yeah. And what is that learning period, of just that new cigar smoker? It's, we take it for granted. I mean, it's years we've learned everything. And we definitely don't want to inundate a new cigar smoker right away with all, so much knowledge. But yeah, what is that, what is the best approach to inform that cigar consumer? But yeah, there's a huge lag of that. And a lot of these guys, really jump in and they want to learn, they want to soak everything up. And we see that. And then I love that. I love when they want to jump in and go all out.
Right. Hey, I apologize. I got to jump off, guys. I got another call. I wish I could stay because this is a lot of fun for me. So enjoy the rest of your time. And Reinhard, I sent you an email. So look forward to hearing from you.
David, many thanks for
all right, thanks, guys. Have a great day. Have fun. Have some
David,
fun here. Start smiling a little bit. You guys are all kicking back with cigars and I'm not. So you guys should have a lot of big smiles on your faces.
Besides that, David, I can only strongly support your point of I also think that there's quite many consumers out there who are looking for information, and me coming from a wine and spirits and hospitality background, I've experienced that a lot as well, that in primarily younger people who are into their whiskeys, into their rums, various different exciting spirits categories in the wine industry. There is a lot of information shared. There's a lot of edutainment, and Ed Sullivan had made a very strong point about that, watching us on Facebook, that absolutely educational component does not necessarily have to be boring. And I think that's our responsibility for all of us as an industry, as cigar media, just as pure cigar nerds, to find meaningful ways of sharing and spreading those information, and helping the entire industry grow by just offering interesting ways of in a lighthearted way consuming content that is not just somebody posting a picture of him smoking a cigar, but something that goes a little further and helps everybody to better understand this ecosystem in the industry.
Well, I would tell you that what you're doing here is a huge part of that. There's a lot of education that happens here with your weekly show. So keep it up. It's great. Yeah, like I said, I know I've learned quite a bit myself. So, all right, enjoy your day, gentlemen. We'll see you soon.
See you, David.
All right, bye-bye.
Much appreciated, David, and Kevin. I think that goes to both you and I, that I absolutely agree with what you said earlier. Nobody wants to be bored, and nobody jumps on a Zoom call or a podcast to to be scared away by all the in-depth knowledge and the geekiness and the nerdiness. But if we find a good balance of bringing together the information, the entertainment, in a lighthearted way, that's really what we should focus on, and how we can reach consumers best.
I think so. These are the best events, right? Right, what you're doing right here. I have a weekly show. I have one guest on. I have my co-host. We do try and ask some questions, put them on the screen. But if you're looking for a lot of information, you're not going to find. You're going to find information on my show, but you're going to find more information in things like this. When you have a group, I'm in. I do a lot of these, and I love them. Because you'll have a manufacturer, a maker, a brand owner. You have your one person, and then you got people asking questions, and these are the events that I think most consumers should be watching, is things just like this, because you're going to gain more knowledge in the 2 hours, whatever that we're on today, than you're going to get, watching 100 other random interviews of someone just talking with a brand owner, and that's it. So I love it. I think this is the format to where people are going to learn the most. They can just watch, and just kind of hang out in the background, and I love this. I love what you do here. You're muted.
Thank you. One other topic, Kevin, that I wanted to address with you is certain brands, certain companies are this year coming back to the trade show. There are a few companies that are launching. There will be Freud Cigar Company, Osgener Family Cigars. Rick Rodriguez, who was with us a couple of weeks ago, he'll be there with the West Tampa Tobacco. And I think Freud, for example, they're getting a lot of attention because of the connections with Eladio Diaz. What are some of those new companies or new brands that you're looking forward to, that you're exciting to see? And I know you made a point earlier that some of the smaller companies and some of the boutiques probably shy away from being present at the trade show because of the prohibitive cost element, but there seems to be certain where they're very happy to go all in, even shortly after launching. So what are you excited to see, and what are the companies that you primarily look forward to?
One thing is, and we can go about this later on if you want, we definitely should be focusing on why some of these companies aren't showing up either. There are some big companies that are not showing up, and they have their own reasons. Somebody needs to address those reasons and why the big companies aren't showing up either. But and with that, the PCA, I don't think promotes all cigar. They promote the companies that they deem worthy of coming out of their show. Drew Estate Acid, for one. We'll just leave it at that. But as in the companies that I look forward to seeing there, definitely Rick Rodriguez. He lives an hour from me. I've never met him. So I'm excited to see him. The Ossingers, I'm super stoked that the family is getting back into cigars. I'm just so excited to see what they're going to bring to the table, because they were such an integral part of the cigar industry for so long, and you just know they never got out of it. They've just been tinkering, they've just been coming up with these blends, and now to show up, I think what they're going to bring is just something that they've been working on for years and years. So I'm super excited to see them, but just everybody in general. And then some of these boutique cigar companies that you've never heard of. I'm excited to see what these, what's going to be showing up. And then just these innovative new cigars, Fratello's will be there. I'll be at his booth for a little bit. We're launching a cigar with Fratello at the PCA. So I'll be interested to see what people think of that. But there's just so many manufacturers. I really wish I had more time. I have a very short list of people that I have to go to, I have to see. But yeah, just in general, I'm excited to see, Rick, West Tampa, Ossinger, Those are probably the two offhand that I'm really, really excited. And Michael Herklotz, Ferry Otego, Michael's such a fantastic guy, such a passionate, consumer and cigar maker. I'm excited to see him. Every time I meet him, it's always a great time. So yeah, there's so much. It's like saying, hey, you're getting ready to go to Disney World. What ride are you most excited to go on? And you can't answer that.
Good point. You mentioned the topic of why certain companies probably aren't present. Do you have a perspective on that topic in particular, or did you want to elaborate further on that?
Well, I mean, you look at so we'll take it. We'll I don't want to speak for those companies, so I'll speak for a company that I know of that I don't want to say I have carte blanche to speak for them, but you look at Risty with JSK Cigars. He's not going to be there because the PCA doesn't believe in his cigar Munchies, the Rocky Road. They don't believe in that. They don't think that cigar should be consumed by the cigar smoker. They don't like that brand. They've made it. They've never used his name publicly per se, but everybody knows when they're talking about that they don't think that Munchies deserves a seat at the table. They don't believe Acid deserves a seat at the table. I think what people are wanting, because of all of the FDA rules and regulations, people are there are a certain segment of the company, and this is the PCA, this is certain brand owners, they're willing to cut off the hand to save the rest of the body. If the if the FDA wants flavored, infused, enhanced cigars to go away, let's give them those. Let's give them that segment of the cigar industry so we can save the rest of the cigars, the traditional premium hand-rolled cigars. And I don't think that's right. I think if a cigar, the Munchies is a premium hand-rolled cigar, it just has been flavor enhanced. You should be fighting for that cigar every bit as you should be fighting for that Padron 64. There should be no difference between those two cigars. And the PCA and other brand owners have made a clear distinction that cigar is not a premium hand-rolled cigar, and that's not something that we should fight for.
Well, I think in general it's a very tricky topic, and it needs to be addressed from various different angles, and a lot of points need to be taken into consideration there. One point that I want to make though is Scott Pierce openly said that the FDA has reached out about attending the trade show and does plan on being present. And I think this has certainly ramped up sort of the urgency of reconsidering that responsible marketing campaign that the FDA has brought forward. And I know, and I'm fully aware that this is a hotly debated topic, and might be challenging for the industry to address. But I honestly believe that most importantly, we all need to be respectful towards each other, and we need, as an industry, to speak in unity and with one voice, and just make sure that we respect what's right and true, and continue to fight all together for the love of handmade premium cigars. And so I think it's a challenging topic, and it should be looked at from various different angles and addressed openly.
I agree, because if there's the easiest way to conquer an army, an easier way to conquer a state, a nation, is divide it. Once you divide it, it's easier to conquer. As soon as you conquer one side, then it's easier to get to the other side. So yes, we definitely need to, we all definitely need to come to the table and sit down and talk about it. Like what really is the motives behind your thoughts? What is of people saying that we don't think that you belong? Let us talk to you about that, versus just making a Facebook post, which gets blown out of proportion, like all Facebook posts do. And then the people that are making these cigars, that are doing this branding that the PCA and others, there's some branding that I don't agree with at all. What are their motives behind that as well? I don't think some of these groups have really just sat down. I think if they just sat down in a lounge over a cigar, and just talk this out, I think everybody could come to terms. When you're fighting via text message, you're fighting via Facebook post, or you're fighting via these press releases, it's not good. It's not good for the industry as a whole. So I would like to see everybody sit down, and I'd like to see Risty, sit down with Scott Pierce, and I'd like to see, and just hash this out. I really think over a cigar, I think those guys, those organizations could come together and reach some kind of agreement. Or if they can't, they'll better understand each other afterwards.
Well, in general, with the topic that came up yesterday, and I think we could all consider it a positive outcome for the cigar industry in general. There will be continuous debates and ongoing discussions and conversations about the definition of a handmade premium cigar, and I think that needs to be closely monitored and followed. And in general, we should all be very cautious and very attentive to paying respect about what the industry is, what it has always been, and what it will be for the future. And as long as we can manage to do that, I think that then we as an industry are in a good place to move forward towards a positive future.
I think so. I think that's going to be our next step, is finding out what the FDA deems a premium hand-rolled cigar. I know there's a set guideline right now of what that is, but if that is allowed to stand, JC Newman out of Tampa, they shut down their factory, because they're the part of the definition of a premium cigar right now is nothing can be machine. No machine can be part of it. And JC Newman doesn't make machine-made cigars. They do make machine-assisted cigars. They are still, there's still one person that's still in, that does some work, but the machine does the bulk of the work. So, that cigar goes away. So there will be people that will fight for JC Newman to be included, in the definition of a premium cigar. But if there are companies that won't fight for Risty, if they're fight, for his cigar, if there are people that won't fight for Acid, don't expect those companies to fight for your cigar either. So, but yeah, that's going to be the next step. We've got to figure out what's flavored, what's enhanced, what's infused, what's the definition of a premium hand rolled cigar. That's going to be the tough one, because I don't know if they are, but I've said it before. I think eventually if we give the FDA the flavored infused segment, I have a feeling they're going to come back at a certain time. And as cigar smokers, we've all read Charlie Minata at Half Wheel. We've read his reviews on a cigar, where Charlie will get cotton candy, he'll get cocoa, he'll get birthday cake, he'll get all of these tasting notes out of a cigar. What says the FDA won't come after that next? And like, hey, what are you doing with this cigar? This guy says he can taste birthday cake in the cigar. You're saying it's not enhanced or infused, but if these people are saying they're getting chocolate notes, if they're getting that, maybe that's a cigar we should look into. So. I don't know. I don't know where we go from here.
Well, I personally just think there's a clear distinction between what is actually flavored and certain flavor notes that people pick up, and whatever is their interpretation of the organoleptic and gustatory experience of a cigar. So that certainly needs to be clearly distinguished. But as I said, in general, I think it's about the respect and focusing on what's best and what's right for the industry as a whole moving forward. And let's have a proper discussion about that.
I agree.
Kevin, I'm curious as to what's in store for Cigar Prop for your weekly podcast. What are the things that you're focusing on, and what will the rest of 2022 hold in store for you? You mentioned the exciting collaboration that you have with Fratello, and that will obviously be showcased at the PCA as well. What else is there to expect for Kevin and Cigar Prop?
Well, I mean, as in for our weekly show, we just try and have fun each and every week. We try and interview someone exciting in the cigar industry, but we also try and bring on some people that maybe you've never heard of, and try and promote some of these boutique brands and try and tell their story, because that's their only outlet is interviews, and doing shows like this or shows like mine is getting their story out, because if you can get your story out, people will be more apt to purchase your product if they know of you and about you. But the rest of 2022 we've got like I said, we're launching with Fratello at this year's PCA, the vice versa, a cigar that we've been working on for 2 years. It's a cigar that's triple capped on both ends. It's not just a cigar you can smoke from either end, because technically you can smoke any cigar from either end, doesn't make any difference. But it's a cigar designed to give you two completely different smoking sessions. You smoke one end, you're going to start off with full bodied, spicy, some nicotine. If you start off at the other end, you're going to get a smooth, creamy cigar. It's a little bit more milder. And then as it burns through, then you're going to finish with that full-bodied cigar. Because, sometimes I don't want to start off with a super peppery, bold cigar. I hate when it's in your face right from the beginning. Even if it smooths out towards the middle, I like starting off with cigars that are a little milder, creamier, and then I like having that building up to that crescendo, if you will, of there's the spice, there's the body, there's the nicotine I'm looking for. So we're excited after 2 years of finally releasing that cigar. We're releasing a couple of other cigars. I'm smoking one of the final testers right now. This is from Sinistro. We'll be launching 2 cigars with Sinistro. This will be on the Trash Panda cigars, so our cigar brand, so that'll be released under that. Fratello is being released under Cigar Prop. So we've got 3 kind of distinct parts of our business. So Cigar Prop is the media side, and plus doing some collaborations. Those collaborations they won't be me selling them. They're just brick and mortars, or just collaborations with other managers or people out there. We've got the show each week, which is separate from Cigar Prop and Trash Panda. And then we have our company, Trash Panda Cigars, which will be selling cigars, being an online retailer, and then having our own cigars made for our company as well. So, and then we're building a cigar lounge on our house. We've got a 550 square foot cigar lounge that we're building on the house, not open to the public, just for us, to hang out and smoke cigars, and taking our media side to the next level, be able to do some cool video. We'll be hosting some events there, a couple times a year for people to come in. We've got manufacturers that want to come in and just host an event, a night with Dunbarton, no sales or anything else, but just come out, hang out with Steve Saka, smoke some cigars, not pressure to buy anything, have some good food, have some good drinks, and that'll be it. So that's pretty much where we're focusing on. We got our hands on a lot of stuff. We might be a little overreaching, to be honest with you.
Exciting to hear, and it's great to see the enthusiasm and the passion just around the topic in general. Now, besides just the evolution for a Cigar Prop, for your show, those collaborations, when you look at the industry as a whole, with everything that we have discussed, with the upcoming trade show, with the rest of 2022 ahead of us, are you bullish in general, or is it more of a bearish outlook on what the rest of the year, and then going into 2020, the next year will hold for premium cigars in general, when you think about 23?
I'm very optimistic. I think it's going to continue to grow. I do see, which is a good thing, I think some manufacturers are paring back their releases. I think during COVID, I mean, how many new releases came out? Like every manufacturer, like once a month, it was a new release. It was a private blend with this, and it was just, it got to the point it was too overwhelming. Like every day, it seemed like I was reading something new about a new cigar coming out. And now I think you're starting to see that pull back a little bit, which is good. I think it's going to allow the consumer to fall in love again with some of the cigars that they used to smoke all the time. So I'm optimistic. I think that we're going to continue to grow, but I think most manufacturers are going to see more growth in already established blends, not necessarily relying on that, every other month or 3 times a year of coming out with this blend. It's like, hey, we've got 10,000 boxes and that's going to be it for 3 months. And then we're going to come out with another release, 10,000 boxes, and that's going to be it. And then you're one of 24 manufacturers that are doing that. I think the market is getting pretty saturated, but I don't see it slowing down. So we'll see.
So in essence, would you expect, or would you like to see more strengthening of like regular releases and more emphasis, probably also in the whole review, rating, and cigar of the year game, towards like the tried and true and tested and the old school, where you see like certain legacy brands and certain legacy blends to be a little more prominent and more present in the media landscape as well there?
I think I would like to, but we'll never see that. It'll never happen. The consumer is the reason that's never going to happen again. They don't. The consumer has this voracious appetite for new. What's new? What's new? What's new? I've been at an event. I was at an event with Steve Saka, promoting a brand new cigar, where someone came up to him and asked him, "Hey, so what do you have new coming out?" And he holds up the cigar and he goes, This is what's new. That's why you're here. This is new. And so I hear that it's the consumer always wants something new. So they always want something new on the top list. They don't want to see how many times Padron made it again. Fuente made it again. Perdomo made it again. They always want something new and exciting. And I don't know if we can get back to that. I would love to see that. I would love to see, especially the new consumers coming in, smoking some of this, I don't want to say vintage stuff, but stuff that we all grew up in, grew up in the cigar industry loving. How many cigar smokers have never smoked a Liga Privada T52, a Padron 64, this cigar. They're jumping on, I smoke this is brand new and I love this. And I try and push them. I go, hey, why don't you go back and smoke, some of like the older stuff, because it's just fantastic cigars. So, the consumer is definitely driving that. And I think it's going to take a couple of manufacturers that are just going to say, hey, we're pulling back. We're going to get back to our core. And you've seen Steve with Dunbarton starting to do that. I think if a couple other manufacturers, started that as well, I think the industry as a whole wants to see that happen. There are so many brands out there that would just they would just give a sigh of relief. Like, yes, let's just pull back a little bit. Let's just spend some time, concentrate, get the consumers familiar with our core line, what we're about. So I'd love to see it.
And there's certainly a reason why certain brands have stood the test of time. Yep. And in particular in times of boom and also in times of bust. I think that's when you really see the ones that have the capability and the means of continuing to do what's right, and make a strong argument about a sustainable future. And there's a reason why certain brands have been there for so long, and others probably disappeared after a short period of time again.
Oh yeah. Lots of companies have just come and gone over the last like 3 years. It's just, you know, there are certain companies that I'll hear about today, you know, even being a cigar nerd, you know, I'll meet someone, well, I had this company like 2 years ago, and I'm like, I've never heard of you. Like, what? You know, like, yeah, I was in, you know, so X amount of stores, and, you know, we just couldn't compete. So I gave up. Like, I don't know who you are, you know, no offense, you know, but yeah, it's, I don't know. A lot of companies out there, tons of companies. And then, like I said, you look at me, I'm a new company starting up, you know, so there's always going to be that, you know, there's always going to be a ton of stuff out there. You know, we'll just see who withstands the test of time. You know, there's a reason why you can go into 99% of every cigar lounge in the world and find Padron, Fuente, Perdomo. You know, that's your staples. You know, Davidoff. Those brands aren't ever going away. And those are the brands that, if you look at it, they don't create new stuff all the time. You know, when's the last time Padron, you know, come out, you know, I mean, they do their, you know, special releases, same with Fuente, but they don't have 12 new blends a year. You know, they focus on their core brand, you know, their core customer. And those are some of the most successful brands out there. So I think others should look at their business model and, you know, maybe take notice.
Also in that regards, I always think about Jordan, and he said it in a lot of our private conversations. He also mentioned it here on the show that, you know, ultimately the cigar that's new to you, every cigar that you haven't smoked before is new to you. So whenever people address him with the question of what's new, then he always comes back with the answer, every cigar you haven't tried. And I think that's a very accurate statement, and probably something to keep in mind as well whilst wandering the halls of the PCA trade show. It's a super exciting time of the year. It's an exciting time to be in the cigar industry. And I wish you, Kevin, a wonderful, wonderful experience at this year's PCA trade show. Make the most out of it, enjoy, and send our regards to the cigar family and community over there. To everybody going, to everybody following along and watching, have a tremendous cigar holiday week, and enjoy that very special time of the year. And I look forward to all the coverage. I look forward to all the news, and seeing you know, people's takeaways from this year's trade show, because I think it will be very revealing and very interesting for the next 6 months and the second half of 2022. So Kevin, it was an absolute pleasure to have you here with us at the Light 'em Up Lounge for our little warm-up towards the PCA trade show. Thank you for what you shared with us. Thanks to everybody who joined us today and for watching. And next year, I say, well, we will be back at the trade show next year, but next week we will be back with another lounge. We'll have guests joining us live from Las Vegas, joining us live from just the after show, if you will, right after the trade show. So be on the lookout for that. And again, for today, Kevin Shahan from Cigar Prop, many thanks for being at the Light 'em Up Lounge.
Thank you for having me. I had an absolute blast. And like I said earlier, we need more of these, you know, so thank you. Thank you for what you do. And thank you for having me on.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for the kind words. All the best. Have a blast at the trade show. And again, our regards to all of you out there. We'll see you next week. And until then, light 'em up. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.